Most horror movies give you a way out, a rescue, a last-second escape. Not tonight. Every film on this list ends the same way. Evil wins, the credits roll, and nothing is coming to save anyone. No heroes, no last-minute miracles. Just evil doing exactly what it came to do, and walking away clean. 5 levels, 10 films. We are going all the way down. Level 1. Evil walks away. The Wretched. Written and directed by the Pierce brothers, The Wretched, 2019, follows Ben Shaw, a teenager sent to spend the summer with his father Liam at a quiet lakeside marina town. Everything seems ordinary until the neighbors bring home a dead deer they hit on the road. That night, something crawls out of the carcass, an ancient entity that forces itself inside Abby, the neighbor's wife, and wears her body like a second skin. The first to notice is Abby's own son, Dylan, who watches his mother's body crack and contort in ways no human frame should move. Terrified, he runs to Ben's house and refuses to go home. When Abby arrives at the door to collect him, she gives Ben an intense stare. By the next morning, Dylan never shows up for his sailing lesson, and when Ben asks Ty about his son, Ty stares back with complete blankness and says that he has no son. Ben slowly pieces it together, discovers the creature's underground shrine, and realizes Mallory's little sister Lily is already marked. He races to save her, but arrives too late. What finally breaks him open is the moment a house fire destroys the witch's shrine, and Ben suddenly remembers he has a little brother named Nathan, a child who had been there the entire summer, completely invisible because the witch had already eaten him from everyone's memory. Ben and Mallory destroy the creature and pull the children out. The next day, the family reunites, and it's time for Ben to go back home. He says goodbye to Mallory, they share a quiet moment, and she gently places a flower in his hair before he gets in the car. He is already pulling away when he looks down and realizes the flower is fake, plastic, incapable of dying. Real flowers wilt in the witch's presence. He turns back, and on the dock, Mallory is already smiling, leading 3 small children onto a boat for a sailing lesson. The question was never whether evil was destroyed. The question was whose face it was wearing now. Cobweb. Directed by Samuel Baudin in his feature debut, Cobweb 2023 follows Peter, a shy and withdrawn 8-year-old boy living with his cold, overbearing parents Carol and Mark in a house that feels less like a home and more like a sealed box. Peter is bullied at school, forbidden from trick-or-treating on Halloween, and offered little warmth by the 2 people who are supposed to protect him. His only real comfort comes from his substitute teacher, Miss Devine, who notices something is deeply wrong long before anyone else does. Then one night, Peter hears tapping from inside his bedroom wall. His parents tell him it is his imagination, but the tapping grows louder, and then it starts talking. The voice introduces itself as Sarah, claiming to be Peter's older sister, hidden away and imprisoned inside the walls by their own parents. She tells Peter that Carol and Mark are dangerous, that they locked her away because they did not want her, and that a young girl from the neighborhood who disappeared years ago had been a trick-or-treater they murdered after she tried to help Sarah escape. Peter digs up the garden and finds the girl's skull buried beneath the soil. Every word Sarah told him appears to be true. Slowly and methodically, Sarah convinces Peter that his parents are planning to do the same to him, and that his only way out is to kill them first. Peter poisons them with Carol's final breath being a desperate warning. Don't let her out. Peter opens the hidden door behind the grandfather clock anyway. What crawls out is a grotesque, disfigured creature. She used Peter as a weapon to take revenge on their parents for locking her away, and now she wants him dead for living the normal life she never could. Peter and Miss Devine manage to force Sarah back into her pit and seal it shut. They leave the house, but as they drive away, the film holds on the walls of that empty house, and the scratching begins again. Sarah promised she would find her way out. The question was never whether evil could be contained. The question was simply how long the walls would hold. Level 2. The curse continues. The Advent Calendar. Written and directed by Patrick Ridremont, The Advent Calendar 2021 follows Eva Roussel, a former professional dancer, now confined to a wheelchair after a car accident 3 years prior. On her birthday, her best friend Sophie arrives from Germany with a gift, an antique wooden advent calendar picked up at a Munich Christmas market. It is beautifully crafted, unnervingly old, and engraved on its back with a single rule: dump it and I'll kill you. Eva eats the first candy before she fully understands what she has agreed to. From that moment, the calendar owns her. Each door she opens releases a supernatural consequence into her life. some seductive, some horrifying, all irreversible. A candy that resurrects a disconnected phone call from her father, another that sends a creature to brutally crush the car of a man who harassed her on the street. A love candy that causes a young nurse named William to fall helplessly in love with her, and at regular intervals, a sensation in her paralyzed legs, a slow, tantalizing promise that if she makes it to December 24th, she will walk again. But the calendar's rules are merciless. Every gift demands a death. Her boss, a man who had humiliated her, is killed. Then Sophie, the best friend who gave her the calendar, the same friend whose driving caused the accident that took Eva's legs, is taken too. Then her father. The calendar is collecting the people around Eva, one by one, as payment for a miracle it may never actually deliver. By Christmas Eve, Eva stands at the final door with one candy left and a body count she can never undo. She records a desperate warning on her phone for whoever comes next, locks it inside the calendar, and screams into the darkness. A year later, a frantic man appears at her door holding that same phone, proof that the calendar has already found its next victim. The curse was never about Eva, it was about whoever was desperate enough to open the first door, and someone always will be. The Feast. Directed by Lee Haven Jones, The Feast, 2021, is a Welsh-language folk horror film set entirely over the course of one dinner party in a sleek, modernist estate carved into the remote Welsh mountains. The family hosting it, politician Gwyn, his wife Glenda, and their two adult sons Guto and Gwared. Glenda inherited the estate from her parents, and Gwyn has been quietly selling pieces of it to Euros, a businessman drilling for minerals beneath the surrounding countryside. Their neighbor Mare, a local farmer who grew up with Glenda, has been invited too, because they want her land next. To help cater the evening, Glenda hires a young woman named Caddy from the nearby village. She arrives on foot, silent, her hair damp from the fields, with soil still on her hands. She moves through the kitchen and the hallways like something that has been in this land far longer than any of them, because she has. Caddy is not a person. She is a curse rooted in Welsh mythology, the physical embodiment of Mother Earth herself, having taken the body of a local girl who died in a car accident near the estate. What follows is a slow, suffocating unraveling. Guto pulls human hair from his throat at dinner. Gwared, who quit medical school to obsess over his body, begins to deteriorate. Gwyn, who has shaken the ground with his greed, is pierced through the ear with steel. And Glenda, who sold her mother's land, who called the old things primitive, who invited this destruction through her own front door, is made to serve Euros a dish made from her own son's severed leg, before being forced to shoot Euros dead and then turn the weapon on herself. By the end, every person at that table is gone. Caddy walks away from the wreckage and back toward the hills, back toward the rise where the earth was first broken. She did not come to punish these people specifically. She came because the land called her, and the land will always call her back when someone decides that what is sacred is also for sale. Level 3. The protagonist is claimed. Anything for Jackson. Directed by Justin G. Dyke, Anything for Jackson, 2020, opens with what looks like an ordinary elderly couple, Dr. Henry Walsh and his wife Audrey. Grief has hollowed them out completely. Their grandson Jackson was killed in a car accident, and the loss broke something inside them that could not be fixed by prayer, therapy, or time. So they turned to something older and darker instead. Audrey and Henry are Satanists, and they have spent months tracking down an ancient grimoire, a book of spells powerful enough, they believe, to pull Jackson's soul out of purgatory and place it inside an unborn child. All they need is the vessel. They find her in Shannon Becker, Henry's heavily pregnant patient, whom he kidnaps and handcuffs to a bed. The ritual begins. But what crawls through the door they open is not Jackson. Instead of one child's soul, they have summoned Surgat, a demon that unlocks every door between the living and the dead. And now the house is flooding with tortured spirits from purgatory, each one desperately fighting to possess a human body. Henry encounters a ghost who violently flosses her own teeth until they fall from her gums. Audrey is visited by a child in a ghost costume, the same Halloween costume worn by her own daughter, who took her life after Jackson died. A contorting man with a bag suffocating over his head corners Shannon in the hallway. The handyman Rory is possessed and drives himself headfirst into his own machine. Desperate and losing control, Henry and Audrey bring in Ian, a fellow cult member, to properly complete the ritual. But the cult leader calls with a warning. Ian has already murdered his own mother. By the time Henry understands what that means, it is too late. Ian stabs Audrey and opens the room wide to Surgat. A giggling ghost drags Ian into the dark. Another entity kills Henry. Shannon breaks free, runs, and manages to reach her car and drive away. As she pulls onto the road, she looks down and realizes her water has broken. The baby is coming. Whether Jackson made it into that child, whether something else did, or whether Shannon is now driving toward a hospital with a demon riding inside her womb, the film leaves that door open. It tears a hole between worlds wide enough for everything else to pour through. Speak No Evil. Directed by Christian Taftrup, Speak No Evil, 2022, follows Bjorn and Louise, a Danish couple vacationing in Tuscany with their young daughter Agnes, who strike up a warm friendship with Patrick and Karen, a Dutch couple, and their son Abel, a sweet, quiet boy born without a tongue. Weeks later, an invitation arrives to spend a weekend at Patrick and Karen's countryside home in the Netherlands. Despite Louise's unease, Bjorn accepts. From the moment they arrive, the discomfort begins. Patrick mocks Louise's vegetarianism at dinner. He berates Abel in front of everyone. He crosses line after line, and every single time, Louise pushes to leave. Bjorn convinces her to stay. When they finally do attempt to leave in the middle of the night, Agnes forgets her stuffed rabbit, and they turn back. That decision costs them everything. Patrick stops the car on a deserted road. What follows is swift and merciless. Patrick beats Bjorn into submission. Karen holds Louise down, while Agnes's tongue is cut out with scissors, mirroring what was done to Abel, who was never their son at all, just their last victim. Bjorn and Louise are marched into a ditch and stoned to death. Before the first stone is thrown, Bjorn asks why. Patrick looks at him without rage, without malice, almost with pity, and says 4 words that land like a verdict: because you let me. A mute Agnes now sits in the back seat as Patrick and Karen drive toward their next holiday, their next invitation, their next family. Evil didn't hunt these people. It waited patiently for them to walk through the door themselves. Level 4. Humanity Falls. The Sadness. Written and directed by Canadian filmmaker Rob Jabaz in his feature debut, The Sadness, 2021, is set in Taipei, where the government has spent months dismissing the Alvin virus as little more than a mild flu. Virologists have been warning anyone who would listen that the virus has the potential to mutate into something catastrophic. Nobody listened. One morning, it does exactly that. Jim and Kat, a young couple, wake up to what appears to be an ordinary day. Jim drives Kat to the train station on his moped and heads to a nearby cafe. Then, an elderly woman walks in, black eyes, blood-soaked, completely unhinged, and the city begins to tear itself apart. The mutated virus has fused the brain's aggression and sexual impulse centers together, stripping every infected person of restraint while leaving them fully conscious of what they are doing. Jim fights his way across a burning city to reach Kat, losing 2 fingers to his infected neighbor along the way. On the subway, Kat watches a businessman who had been quietly harassing her transform into something unspeakable, pursuing her through the station with an axe. The city's last line of authority dissolves on live television when an infected army general pulls a grenade in front of the president. By the film's end, Jim reaches Kat, bloodied and desperate, but the signs are already there. He had been infected during his escape across the city. The virus does not announce itself. It simply waits. 2 people who spent the entire film fighting to stay human reach each other just in time for one of them to stop being human entirely. Humanity didn't fall all at once. It fell one person at a time, quietly. Hellhole. Directed by Bartosz M. Kowalski, Hellhole, 2022, opens in 1957 Poland, where a priest attempts to murder a newborn baby bearing a strange scar on his chest before militia officers burst in and shoot him dead. 30 years later, Officer Merrick arrives at a remote monastery disguised as a priest, sent undercover to investigate the disappearance of 8 local women brought there for exorcisms and never seen again. The monastery presents itself as a sanatorium for the possessed, holy men doing God's work behind stone walls. Marek quickly discovers the exorcisms are entirely staged, theatrical frauds designed to deceive the Vatican. But what is happening to the women is far worse. He finds their bodies hanging on hooks in a hidden freezer, their organs already harvested and fed to every person at the dinner table, including him. Before he can process that horror, Piotr, the one monk Marek had trusted, leads him straight into a trap. He is captured, restrained beside the well beneath the church, and Prior Andrei steps forward to reveal everything. Marek is the baby who survived in 1957, born during an eclipse marked from birth as the Chosen One. The Brotherhood has been waiting 800 years for this moment. The church itself was constructed around a well serving as a direct portal to hell. Every meal Marek ate contained the flesh of a sinner, 7 sinners, as the ritual required. All that remains is the blood of an innocent. A young woman's throat is opened. Marek is forced to drink too, then nothing happens. The ritual appears to have failed. A disappointed Pyotr stabs Marek and throws his body into the well. The next morning, Pyotr suffocates a drunken prior Andrei with a pillow and assumes control of the monastery. Then Marek rises from the well, not as himself, but as something that has been waiting inside him since birth. He levitates every priest and suspends them upside down in a mockery of crucifixion. Outside, the sky tears open. Evil did not infiltrate that monastery. It was the architect. Level 5. There was never any hope. The Dark and the Wicked. Written and directed by Brian Bertino, The Dark and the Wicked, 2020, follows Louise and Michael, 2 adult siblings who return to their family's remote Texas farm after learning their father's illness has entered its final stages. Their mother has been caring for him alone for months, and the isolation has clearly worn her down. When they arrive, she urges them to leave immediately, not out of exhaustion, but out of terror. That night, she cuts off her own fingers in the kitchen, walks to the barn, and hangs herself. What follows is not a haunting in any traditional sense. A demonic entity has already been on this farm for a long time, long before Louise and Michael arrived, feeding on their father's dying body and using his deterioration as an open door. It takes whatever shape serves it best. It appears as a priest named Father Thorne at their mother's burial, gives Louise his phone number, and then vanishes. When Louise calls the number, a man in Chicago answers. He has never been to Texas in his life. The entity slips into the body of the ranch hand Charlie, driving him to put a shotgun to his own head. It possesses the nurse, who drives knitting needles through her own eyes. It follows Michael all the way home, tricks him into slitting his own throat by showing him an illusion of his wife and daughters already dead, and then walks his real family through the front door to find him bleeding out on the kitchen floor. Louise stays. She sits beside her father through his final breath, and the moment he dies, the demon turns to her. There is no final stand, no last escape. The entity moves through this family the way weather moves through a field. It was already there when the story began, and it simply waits for each of them to be alone. By the time anyone understood what they were facing, it had already won. Barbarian. Written and directed by Zach Kreger in his solo feature debut, Barbarian, 2022, begins on a stormy night in Brightmoor, one of Detroit's most abandoned and forgotten neighborhoods. Tess Marshall arrives at a house she booked on Airbnb, only to find it already occupied by a man named Keith. With no available hotels nearby, she reluctantly stays. Keith is polite, careful, disarming, but the house is already wrong. Tess wakes in the night to find her bedroom door open. Nobody touched it. In the basement, hidden behind a locked door, she finds a small room with a dirty mattress, a camera mounted on the wall, and a bloody handprint. Keith goes down to investigate and never comes back. When Tess follows, she finds a network of tunnels running deep beneath the house, and something enormous, naked, and deformed that smashes Keith's skull against the wall without hesitation. What lives beneath that house is a woman, though calling her that barely covers it. She is the product of decades of inbreeding, the result of a man named Frank who spent years abducting women, fathering children by them, and then fathering children by those children too. The VHS tapes he left behind document everything. When AJ, the house's current owner, a Hollywood actor fleeing rape allegations, arrives to sell the property, he falls into the pit too. He finds Tess alive, learns the truth about Frank, and then pushes Tess off a water tower to save himself. The creature jumps after her and shields her from the fall, because Tess, to it, is something close to family. Ajay finds them both alive and begins rationalizing what he just did. The creature splits his head open before he finishes the sentence. The evil in Barbarian was never hiding. It was just waiting in a house that was built specifically to hide it, in a neighborhood so forgotten that nobody would ever think to look. And that's the list. If you are choosing where to start, The Wretched is the one. Unnerving, patient, and that final dock scene will stay with you for days. If you want something that gets under your skin in a completely different way, Speak No Evil is the film that will make you question every friendly stranger you have ever said yes to. And if you are ready for the one that was never going to let anyone walk away from the very first frame, The Dark and the Wicked is waiting for you. Drop a comment which level broke you, hit like and subscribe. More horror breakdowns coming soon.